My name is Detective James Walker, and I have been serving with the Philadelphia Police Department for 24 years. In over 2 decades of investigating crimes, I have encountered every type of criminal imaginable. But sometimes, you meet someone whose story forces you to confront uncomfortable truths about educational corruption, the failure of systems meant to protect children, and what happens when a person dedicated to changing young lives watches their best student die because of institutional betrayal. This is the story that Robert Turner told me 14 months ago, sitting in an interrogation room after being arrested for multiple counts of fraud, extortion, blackmail, and conspiracy. When Robert first began speaking, I expected to hear another tale of financial crime. Instead, I heard a confession that made me question everything. I thought I knew about the education system and the lengths a teacher will go to seek justice for a murdered student. Robert Turner was 52 years old when he committed the crimes that brought him to my attention. But to understand why Robert became a criminal, you have to understand the teacher he once was and how a corrupt school system destroyed not just his career, but the life of the most promising student he had ever taught. Robert had wanted to be a teacher since he was a teenager, growing up in a rough neighborhood in South Philadelphia. He had watched many of his childhood friends drop out of school, join gangs, and end up dead or in prison before they turned 25. But Robert had been fortunate enough to have one teacher, Mr. Henry Davis, who had believed in him and pushed him to pursue higher education. Mr. Davis had spent countless hours tutoring Robert, helping him apply for scholarships, and convincing him that education was his ticket out of poverty and violence. Because of Mr. Davis's dedication, Robert became the first person in his family to attend college, earning a full scholarship to Temple University, where he majored in history and education. Detective Walker Robert said, his voice filled with the passion he had once felt for teaching. Mr. Davis saved my life by showing me that someone cared about my future. I became a teacher because I wanted to do the same thing for other kids who were growing up in the same kind of environment I came from. After earning his teaching degree, Robert deliberately chose to work at Lincoln High School, one of the most challenging schools in Philadelphia. Lincoln was located in a neighborhood plagued by poverty, gang violence, and drug dealing. Most of the students came from single-parent households, where parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and had little time to monitor their children's education. The school had a graduation rate below 50%, and most students who did graduate were not prepared for college-level work. Many teachers at Lincoln viewed their job as simply maintaining order and getting through each day, rather than actually educating students who seemed destined for failure. But Robert was different. He arrived at Lincoln High School with the same determination and optimism that Mr. Davis had shown him years earlier. He believed that every student had potential and that, with the right support and encouragement, they could overcome the obstacles of poverty and violence to build better lives. Robert taught American history, but his classroom became much more than a place to learn about dates and events. He created a safe space where students could discuss their struggles and dreams. He stayed after school every day to provide extra tutoring for students who were behind. He used his own money to buy books and supplies for students whose families could not afford them. For 15 years, Robert poured his heart and soul into teaching at Lincoln High School. He had modest successes, along the way helping dozens of students graduate and a handful earn scholarships to community colleges. But he had never found a student with the kind of exceptional talent and potential that could truly transform their circumstances until he met Marcus Williams. Marcus entered Robert's 10th grade history class as a quiet, reserved student who sat in the back of the room and rarely participated in discussions. Robert might have overlooked him, except that Marcus's first essay was so well written and thoughtful that Robert suspected he had plagiarized it from the internet. When Robert confronted Marcus about the essay, Marcus was insulted and hurt. He explained that he loved reading and writing and spent most of his free time at the public library because his home was too chaotic and violent for him to concentrate. Marcus lived with his mother, who worked 2 jobs, and his 2 younger siblings in a small apartment where drug dealers operated in the hallways and gunshots were a regular nighttime occurrence. Detective Walker Robert told me, tears forming in his eyes. Marcus was the most naturally gifted student I had ever taught in 15 years. He had a brilliant mind, an incredible work ethic, and a hunger to learn that reminded me of myself at that age. I saw in him the same potential that Mr. Davis had seen in me. Robert began mentoring Marcus with the same dedication that Mr. Davis had shown him decades earlier. He tutored Marcus for hours after school, helping him catch up on years of inadequate education from underfunded schools. He introduced Marcus to advanced literature and historical texts that challenged his thinking. He helped Marcus develop his writing skills until his essays were good enough to compete with students from the best schools in the city. Marcus flourished under Robert's guidance. His grades improved dramatically, and he began winning academic competitions and essay contests. Other teachers noticed Marcus's transformation, and several commented to Robert that he had found a truly special student. But more importantly, Marcus began to believe in himself and his potential. He talked about becoming a lawyer or a journalist someday. He dreamed of going to a prestigious university and coming back to help other kids from his neighborhood. He saw education as his way out of the cycle of poverty and violence that had trapped so many people he knew. During Marcus's junior year, Robert helped him prepare applications for summer academic programs at universities. Marcus was accepted to a competitive program at the University of Pennsylvania, where he spent 6 weeks studying political science and participating in mock trials. The program director called Robert personally to tell him that Marcus was one of the most impressive students they had ever had in the program. As Marcus's senior year began, Robert started helping him prepare college applications. Marcus's grades were excellent, his test scores were strong, and his essays were compelling. Robert believed that Marcus had a real chance at earning a full scholarship to a top university, something that almost never happened for students from Lincoln High School. The key was the Whitman Scholarship, a prestigious full-ride scholarship to any university in the country, awarded annually to one outstanding student from an underserved Philadelphia public school. The scholarship covered tuition, room and board, books, and even provided a stipend for living expenses. For a student like Marcus, it was a life-changing opportunity. Robert spent months helping Marcus perfect his Whitman Scholarship application. They worked on his essays, revised them dozens of times, and gathered letters of recommendation from teachers, professors, and community leaders. Marcus wrote passionately about his dreams of using education to escape poverty and his commitment to returning to his community to help other young people. When Marcus submitted his application, Robert was confident that he had a strong chance of winning. Marcus's academic record was exceptional. His personal story was compelling, and his potential was undeniable. Robert allowed himself to hope that he was about to witness the same kind of transformation in Marcus's life that Mr. Davis had created in his own life decades earlier. But what Robert did not know was that Lincoln High School's principal, Dr. James Mitchell, had his own plans for the Whitman Scholarship, and those plans did not include Marcus Williams. Dr. Mitchell had been principal of Lincoln High School for 8 years, and in that time he had gained a reputation as a politically connected administrator who was more interested in advancing his own career than in serving students. He maintained relationships with school board members, city politicians, and wealthy donors who could help him move up to a more prestigious position. Dr. Mitchell's nephew, Brandon Mitchell, was also a senior at Lincoln High School. Brandon was an average student with mediocre grades and test scores. He had not distinguished himself academically, athletically, or in any other way. He was the kind of student who would normally attend a local community college or perhaps a less competitive state university. But Dr. Mitchell wanted more for his nephew. He wanted Brandon to attend a prestigious university that would open doors to opportunities that Brandon's modest abilities would never earn on their own. And Dr. Mitchell knew that the Whitman Scholarship could make that possible if Brandon were selected as Lincoln's nominee. The problem was that school principals had significant influence over which student's application was forwarded to the Whitman Scholarship Committee. While the scholarship was supposed to go to the most deserving student, principals could effectively choose their school's nominee by controlling the application process. Robert did not initially realize that Dr. Mitchell was planning to manipulate the process. He assumed that Marcus's application would be evaluated fairly and that his exceptional qualifications would speak for themselves. But he began to suspect something was wrong when Dr. Mitchell called him to his office for a meeting 2 weeks before the application deadline. Dr. Mitchell explained to Robert that he had reviewed both Marcus Williams' application and his nephew Brandon's application, and had determined that Brandon would be Lincoln High School's official nominee for the Whitman Scholarship. He instructed Robert not to submit Marcus's application to the scholarship committee. Robert was shocked and outraged. He argued that Marcus was clearly the superior candidate with better grades, better test scores, better essays, and better recommendations. He pointed out that Brandon had not distinguished himself in any way, and that nominating him over Marcus would be both unfair and embarrassing for the school. But Dr. Mitchell was unmoved. He explained that as principal, he had final authority over scholarship nominations, and that his decision was final. When Robert continued to protest, Dr. Mitchell's tone became threatening. He suggested that Robert should focus on his teaching duties and not interfere with administrative decisions unless he wanted to face consequences for insubordination. Detective Walker, Robert told me, his voice filled with anger that still burned. Years later, I realized in that moment that Dr. Mitchell was going to steal Marcus's future to benefit his own nephew. He was going to take away the opportunity that could change Marcus's life just because he had the power to do it and because he valued his own family over the students he was supposed to serve. Robert left Dr. Mitchell's office devastated but determined to find a way to help Marcus. He researched the scholarship process and discovered that while principals had significant influence, the scholarship committee also accepted applications directly from students in exceptional circumstances. Robert decided to help Marcus submit his application, directly bypassing Dr. Mitchell's authority. But when Dr. Mitchell learned what Robert was planning, he took action to stop it. He called Robert back to his office and made it clear that if Marcus's application was submitted, Dr. Mitchell would use his authority as principal to sabotage it. He threatened to write a negative evaluation of Marcus, calling his character into question and suggesting that his academic achievements were the result of great inflation rather than genuine ability. Dr. Mitchell also threatened Robert's career. He suggested that Robert's intense involvement with Marcus could be portrayed as inappropriate and that he could face an investigation for boundary violations with a student. The threat was baseless and unethical, but Dr. Mitchell made it clear that he had the power and political connections to make Robert's life very difficult. Robert felt trapped. He could not let Marcus submit his application, knowing that Dr. Mitchell would sabotage it with false accusations that would destroy not just Marcus's scholarship chances, but potentially his entire academic future. But he also could not accept that Marcus would be denied this life-changing opportunity because of corruption and nepotism. Robert tried to appeal to other administrators and school board members, but quickly learned that Dr. Mitchell's political connections made him essentially untouchable. Board members were unwilling to question his decisions, and other administrators were afraid to challenge someone who had the power to end their careers. In the end, Robert was forced to tell Marcus that he would not be able to compete for the Whitman Scholarship. He tried to soften the blow by explaining that there were other scholarships and opportunities, but Marcus understood what had really happened. His dreams of attending a top university were being crushed because of corruption and favoritism. Marcus was devastated. He had worked so hard for 3 years believing that his efforts would be rewarded with opportunities. He had sacrificed time with friends and family to study. He had maintained hope even when his circumstances seemed hopeless. And now he was learning that none of it mattered because the system was rigged against students like him. Detective Walker, Robert said Marcus asked me why he should even bother trying anymore if people like Dr. Mitchell were always going to use their power to help their own families while students like him were pushed aside. I did not have a good answer for him. Brandon Mitchell was awarded Lincoln High School's nomination for the Whitman Scholarship. His application was weak and his qualifications were mediocre, but with Dr. Mitchell's strong recommendation and the absence of any competing applications from Lincoln, he was awarded the scholarship. Brandon Mitchell would attend the University of Pennsylvania on a full scholarship that should have gone to Marcus Williams. The impact on Marcus was catastrophic. Without the Whitman Scholarship or any other significant financial aid, Marcus could not afford to attend a 4-year university. He enrolled at the local community college and tried to maintain his academic focus, but the disappointment and betrayal had broken something inside him. Marcus began missing classes and his grades declined. He stopped coming to see Robert for advice and mentoring. He started spending time with friends from his neighborhood who were involved in gang activity. Robert tried to reach out to Marcus multiple times, but Marcus had given up hope that education could change his life. 6 months after graduation, Marcus Williams was shot and killed in a gang-related incident in his neighborhood. He was 18 years old. The brilliant, promising student who should have been studying at a top university was dead because a corrupt principal had stolen his future to benefit his own nephew. When Robert learned of Marcus's death, he experienced a grief and rage that was unlike anything he had felt before. The student he had mentored and believed in, the young man who had reminded him so much of himself, was dead because Dr. Mitchell had valued nepotism over merit and corruption over justice. Robert attended Marcus's funeral and saw Marcus's mother collapsed in grief over the casket of her eldest son. He thought about all the hours Marcus had spent in the library studying and dreaming of a better future. He thought about the essays Marcus had written about using education to escape poverty and help his community. He thought about the potential that had been destroyed by one man's selfish abuse of power. At Marcus's funeral, Robert made a promise to himself and to Marcus's memory. He was going to make sure that Dr. Mitchell and everyone else who had enabled this corruption would pay for what they had done. He was going to seek justice for Marcus, even if it meant destroying his own life in the process. After Marcus Williams's funeral, Robert Turner returned to teaching at Lincoln High School, but he was a changed man. The passionate, dedicated educator who had once believed in the power of education to transform lives had been replaced by someone colder and more calculating. Robert had a mission now, and that mission was to destroy everyone responsible for Marcus's death. Robert knew that confronting Dr. Mitchell directly would accomplish nothing. The principal had political protection and the power to ruin Robert's career with false accusations. If Robert was going to get justice for Marcus, he would need to be patient, methodical, and strategic. Detective Walker, Robert told me, his voice taking on the cold, analytical tone that characterized his transformation from teacher to vigilante. I spent 2 years planning my revenge. I studied Dr. Mitchell and the entire school administration, learning their secrets, their crimes, and their vulnerabilities. I was going to expose all of them, but I needed irrefutable evidence that even their political connections could not overcome. Robert began his investigation by documenting every instance of corruption and misconduct he could find at Lincoln High School. He discovered that Dr. Mitchell's manipulation of Marcus's scholarship application was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of corruption that had been going on for years. Dr. Mitchell had been steering scholarships, grants, and other opportunities to students from politically connected families or families who made donations to causes he supported. Students with genuine merit and need were routinely passed over in favor of students whose families could provide benefits to Dr. Mitchell's career advancement. Robert also discovered financial irregularities in how the school's budget was managed. Dr. Mitchell had been diverting funds meant for classroom supplies and student programs into accounts that he controlled. He had been using school resources for personal expenses and had created fake vendors to bill the school for services that were never provided. Most disturbingly, Robert learned that Dr. Mitchell had covered up multiple instances of violence and sexual harassment at the school to protect his reputation and avoid negative attention from the school board. Students who had been assaulted or harassed had been pressured to keep quiet, and their complaints had been buried in files that were never properly investigated. Over 2 years, Robert compiled a massive dossier documenting all of Dr. Mitchell's crimes and misconduct, but he knew that simply reporting this information to the school board would not be enough. Dr. Mitchell's political connections would protect him, and Robert would likely be dismissed as a disgruntled employee, making false accusations. Robert's plan was complex and required him to engage in activities that he knew were illegal. He hacked into Dr. Mitchell's email accounts and computer systems to obtain electronic evidence of his crimes. He created false identities to communicate with school board members and journalists. He forged documents to make his evidence more compelling and difficult to dismiss. Robert also expanded his investigation beyond just Dr. Mitchell. He researched every school, board member who had enabled Dr. Mitchell's corruption through their negligence or complicity. He investigated the superintendent who had ignored complaints about Dr. Mitchell because they were political allies. He even looked into Brandon Mitchell to see if Marcus's stolen scholarship had actually benefited him. What Robert discovered was that Brandon Mitchell had dropped out of the University of Pennsylvania after just 1 year, despite having the full-ride scholarship that should have gone to Marcus. Brandon had failed most of his classes and had been asked to leave the university. The scholarship that had cost Marcus his future had been completely wasted on someone who did not have the ability or motivation to take advantage of it. This discovery filled Robert with a rage that was even more intense than what he had felt at Marcus's funeral. Marcus had died because his scholarship had been stolen, and that scholarship had been wasted on someone who did not even want it. The injustice was so profound that Robert became even more determined to make everyone involved suffer. Detective Walker, Robert said, learning that Brandon Mitchell had thrown away the opportunity that Marcus died for was the moment I stopped caring about the consequences of my actions. I was going to destroy these people even if it meant going to prison myself. Robert's public exposure campaign began with anonymous packages sent to every major news outlet in Philadelphia. The packages contained detailed documentation of Dr. Mitchell's crimes, including emails showing how he had manipulated the scholarship, process evidence of financial fraud, and proof that he had covered up violence and harassment at the school. Robert had carefully curated the evidence to tell a compelling story that journalists could not ignore. He framed the narrative around Marcus Williams, the brilliant student, whose future had been stolen and who had died as a result of institutional betrayal. He included Marcus's essays, scholarship application, and photographs showing the promising young man who had been destroyed by corruption. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. Local news stations ran investigative reports about corruption at Lincoln High School. Newspapers published front-page stories about Dr. Mitchell's crimes. National education websites picked up the story as an example of systemic failure in urban public schools. The publicity created pressure that Dr. Mitchell's political connections could not contain. The school board was forced to launch a formal investigation. The Philadelphia District Attorney's Office began looking into potential criminal charges. Parents organized protests demanding Dr. Mitchell's removal. But Robert was not satisfied with just exposing Dr. Mitchell. He wanted to destroy the principal's life the same way Dr. Mitchell had destroyed Marcus's future. Robert began targeting Dr. Mitchell's personal life using the information he had gathered during his investigation. Robert discovered that Dr. Mitchell had been having affairs with multiple women, including some who worked at the school. Robert anonymously provided evidence of these affairs to Dr. Mitchell's wife, triggering a divorce that would be expensive and humiliating. Robert also targeted Dr. Mitchell's finances. He reported Dr. Mitchell to the IRS for tax evasion, providing evidence that Dr. Mitchell had failed to report income from the financial schemes he had been running at the school. The resulting audit and investigation would cost Dr. Mitchell tens of thousands of dollars in back taxes, penalties, and legal fees. Most devastatingly, Robert orchestrated a public confrontation at a school board meeting, where Marcus's mother confronted Dr. Mitchell directly. Robert had helped Marcus's mother prepare a statement describing how her son's dreams had been crushed and how he had died as a result of Dr. Mitchell's corruption. The confrontation was captured on video and went viral on social media. Millions of people watched as Marcus's mother tearfully described her son's potential and how it had been destroyed by a corrupt principal who valued his nephew over deserving students. The video created a national conversation about corruption in education and the way systems fail poor and minority students. Dr. Mitchell was forced to resign in disgrace. He lost his position, his reputation, and his career. The school board investigation found evidence of multiple crimes, and Dr. Mitchell was eventually charged with fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. But Robert's campaign of revenge extended beyond Dr. Mitchell. He systematically targeted every school, board member, and administrator who had enabled the corruption at Lincoln High School. He exposed their financial conflicts of interest, their negligence in oversight, and their complicity in covering up misconduct. Several school board members were forced to resign. The superintendent was fired. Multiple administrators faced disciplinary actions or were transferred to other positions. Robert's investigation had triggered a wholesale cleaning of corruption in the Philadelphia public school system. Robert also went after Brandon Mitchell, the nephew who had received Marcus's scholarship. Robert created a public campaign describing how Brandon had wasted an opportunity that could have saved Marcus's life. He contacted the University of Pennsylvania and provided evidence that Brandon's application had been based on false information and manipulation. The university was embarrassed by the scandal and created a new scholarship in Marcus Williams's name to be awarded annually to a deserving student from an underserved Philadelphia public school. It was a small measure of justice, but it meant that Marcus's memory would live on in a positive way. But Robert's quest for revenge had required him to engage in criminal activities that eventually caught the attention of law enforcement. His hacking into email accounts and computer systems was illegal. His creation of false identities and forged documents was fraud. His systematic campaign to destroy the lives of multiple people crossed the line from whistleblowing into harassment and extortion. The FBI investigation into the corruption at Lincoln High School eventually traced some of the anonymous packages and communications back to Robert. While investigators appreciated that Robert had exposed genuine crimes, they could not ignore that he had broken numerous laws in the process. Robert was arrested and charged with computer fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy. He had spent 2 years orchestrating the downfall of corrupt administrators, but in doing so, he had become a criminal himself. Detective Walker Robert said during our final interview, "People ask me if I regret what I did to Dr. Mitchell and the others. The honest answer is no. They destroyed Marcus's life and enabled a system that failed countless other students. They deserved everything that happened to them." Robert paused, looking at the walls of the interrogation room. "But I do regret that I had to become a criminal to get justice for my student. I spent my entire adult life dedicated to education and helping young people. I believed in working within the system and following the rules. But when the system completely failed Marcus, I realized that sometimes the only way to get justice is to break the rules." Robert looked at me with eyes that still held both the passionate teacher he had been and the calculating vigilante he had become. The worst part, Detective Walker, is that even after destroying Dr. Mitchell's career and exposing all the corruption, Marcus is still dead. Nothing I did brought him back or gave him the future he deserved. All I did was prove that the system was broken, but I could not fix it. As our interview concluded, I found myself grappling with questions that have no easy answers. Robert Turner had committed serious crimes, including hacking fraud and identity theft. By any legal standard, he was a criminal who deserved to be punished for his actions. But the corruption Robert had exposed was real and had genuinely destroyed lives. Dr. Mitchell and the other administrators had abused their power-stolen opportunities from deserving students and created a system that valued political connections over merit. Without Robert's illegal investigation, these crimes might never have been exposed. Robert's trial became a symbol of the broader debate about corruption in education and the failure of systems to protect disadvantaged students. Teachers' unions and education reform advocates rallied to his defense, arguing that he was a hero who had sacrificed himself to expose institutional failure. The prosecution argued that Robert's crimes were serious and that vigilante justice could not be excused even when it exposed genuine wrongdoing. They pointed out that Robert had destroyed lives and careers that, while corrupt, were still protected by due process and legal rights. The jury convicted Robert on multiple counts but recommended leniency in sentencing. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. It was a relatively light sentence, given the seriousness of his crimes. But the judge acknowledged that Robert's actions had been motivated by a genuine desire for justice rather than personal gain. Robert Turner sits in federal prison today, serving his sentence for crimes he committed in pursuit of justice. For a murdered student, he spends his days tutoring other inmates, helping them prepare for GED exams and teaching basic literacy skills. Even in prison, Robert cannot stop being a teacher. Dr. Mitchell also sits in federal prison, serving 5 years for his corruption crimes. He has lost everything: his career, his marriage, his reputation, and his freedom. His name has become synonymous with educational corruption and the abuse of power. Marcus Williams remains dead buried in a cemetery in South Philadelphia with a gravestone that reads, "Beloved son, brilliant student, stolen future." His mother visits his grave every week, bringing flowers and telling him about the scholarship that was created in his name and the students who have benefited from it. The case of Robert Turner and Dr. Mitchell serves as a stark reminder of how corruption in education destroys not just individual lives but entire communities. When systems fail to protect the most vulnerable students, the consequences can be fatal. Sometimes the only people willing to fight for justice are those who have already lost everything. And sometimes seeking that justice requires becoming the very thing we once stood against. Robert Turner was a dedicated teacher who believed in the transformative power of education. But when the system he believed in betrayed his most promising student, Robert became something else, a vigilante who would break any law and destroy any life in pursuit of what he believed was justice. The question that haunts everyone involved in this case is whether Robert's crimes were justified by the corruption he exposed. There is no easy answer. What is clear is that Marcus Williams deserved better than he got from a system that was supposed to protect and nurture him. If this story affected you, please subscribe to our channel for more true crime confessions. Next week, we will hear from someone whose story will challenge everything you think you know about justice and revenge. Until then, remember that the students we failed today may have advocates tomorrow who will stop at nothing to seek justice on their behalf.